Don't move. Keep those hands where I can see them.
Hands are up, sir. I have done nothing wrong.
I'll decide that.
My identification is inside my car. I need to reach into the vehicle to get it.
You guys piss me off.
I am asking you to let me show you who I am.
Don't reach
I am
for
reaching
anything.
for my ID inside the...
There were 6 agents on Hennepin Avenue that morning. Only one of them fired. The roadblock had been authorized before dawn, a routine immigration enforcement operation, the kind that moves through the approval chain on a Tuesday and draws no attention by Wednesday. Orange cones. Reflective vests. A single-lane redirect that cleared most vehicles in under 2 minutes. The agents had been on site since 7 in the morning. By 11:30, the operation had processed over 40 vehicles without incident. Benjamin Duran joined the line at 11:36. He had been driving from North Minneapolis toward the demonstration assembly point on Hennepin Avenue. He had 4 minutes before his world changed in a way he could not have anticipated and Christopher Boris could not undo. Boris left his post and walked toward Benjamin's vehicle. He had not been called over. No flag had been raised. No supervisor had directed him. He had looked through a car window, seen 2 cardboard poster tubes in the back seat and 2 stickers on the rear bumper, and made a decision that took less time than it should have. Benjamin's hands were on the steering wheel. They had been on the steering wheel since the line formed. The command to step out came before Boris had offered a single word of explanation. If you believe a man's politics should never be a reason to pull a trigger, stay with this story. Like this video, subscribe, and drop your city in the comments. This needs to travel. The hands were already visible. Both of them, open on the wheel, exactly where they had been since Benjamin Duran rolled to a stop behind the orange cones. He had not been told why he was being approached. He had not been given a badge number or a name. He had been given an order he was already complying with before it was issued. Christopher Boris stood 7 feet from the driver's side door. 41 years old, 9 years with federal immigration enforcement. His right hand was at his side, close to his weapon. His eyes had moved off Benjamin's face and settled somewhere further back on the rolled cardboard tubes visible through the rear window, on the rear bumper where 2 stickers sat side by side. Benjamin kept his hands on the wheel and asked, at a measured volume, what the basis for the stop was. Boris told him to step out of the vehicle. Benjamin stated that he would comply and asked whether he should retrieve his identification first. Boris told him to step out. Benjamin said he was reaching for the door handle only, that his hands were in view, and that he was opening the door as instructed. The door swung 6 inches. Boris fired. The shot grazed Benjamin's left shoulder. He went down off the seat, through the open door, onto the asphalt, and the 5 other agents on Hennepin Avenue turned at the sound. None of them had been called over. None of them had been told a shot was coming. The operation had been routine for 4.5 hours. It stopped being routine in the space of 1 second. Benjamin was on the ground on his right side, arms away from his body. He was conscious. He did not move. Boris stood over him. He looked at the poster tubes through the rear window. He looked at the stickers on the bumper. He looked at Benjamin on the ground. He did not key his radio. 11 seconds passed. A woman on the opposite sidewalk had stopped walking. Her phone had been raised for 40 seconds. She had started recording when the tone of the commands reached her across the street and told her without ambiguity that something about the stop was not standard. At the end of the 11th second, Boris spoke 4 words, low, not into the radio, said to no one in particular and therefore recorded by everyone present. Then he keyed his radio and reported shots fired, subject down. Subject had been reaching for an unidentified object in the rear of the vehicle. Benjamin, from the ground, announced clearly that he was not reaching for anything, that he was an honorably discharged veteran of the United States Army, and that he required medical assistance. His voice did not waver. Everyone who heard the recording later remarked on that, not the words, but the steadiness of the voice behind them. First responders arrived in 7 minutes. Benjamin was treated on the pavement and transported. Boris gave a brief statement to the first patrol officer on scene, walked to his vehicle, and began writing his report. He filed it at 12:51 in the afternoon. Benjamin's wound was being cleaned 40 feet away. Here is what the report did not mention. Benjamin Duran was 34 years old, born in St. Paul, enlisted in the United States Army at 19. 2 combat deployments, the first to Afghanistan, the second to Iran during the extended advisory period, honorably discharged at 28. His commanding officer had written in his final review that Benjamin Duran was a man whose presence made every person in his unit feel accounted for. For the past 4 years, he had been a youth program coordinator at a community center in North Minneapolis. He worked after-school sessions during the week and showed up on Saturday mornings without being required to. That morning he had kissed his 7-year-old daughter goodbye, loaded the poster tubes into the back seat, and driven toward the assembly point where 3 colleagues were waiting. He was not carrying a weapon. He had no outstanding warrants. His registration was current. His record was clean. He had given Boris nothing. Now the detail of the story has not yet explained. Benjamin Durand did not collapse when the bullet hit him. He dropped deliberately, at an angle, his body moving in a direction that took the projected path of the round off-center. The graze to his left shoulder was not chance. It was the result of a decision made faster than conscious thought by a nervous system that had been trained across 2 combat deployments and hundreds of hours of live fire exercise to do one thing the moment it registered incoming fire: get low, get lateral, clear the line. His body processed the threat before his mind named it. Christopher Boris had fired at a man trained to survive being shot at. He had not known that. He had looked through a car window, seen a cardboard sign, and acted on what he decided it meant. The gun had not been the first decision. It had been the last in a sequence that started 3 blocks back when Boris left his post and followed a vehicle he had already judged before he reached it. 3 recordings existed by the time Benjamin left the treatment facility. Boris knew about one of them. By the morning of day 2, all 3 recordings were in the district attorney's office. The pharmacy on the corner had a CCTV unit mounted above the entrance wide-angle, continuous feed, 48-hour loop. The manager had reviewed the footage the previous evening without being contacted and delivered the relevant segment to the district attorney's office before 10 that night. What the footage showed: Boris's vehicle leaving its position in the operation and following Benjamin's car for half a block before activating any signal. No traffic infraction preceded the stop. The stop had begun before any legal basis for it had been established. The bystander's phone had captured the sequence from the sidewalk Benjamin's hands through the open car window, the poster shifting in the back seat as the door opened, the shot, and then the 11 seconds. Boris standing. Boris looking at the tubes in the back seat. Boris looking at Benjamin on the ground. Boris looking back at the bumper stickers. Then 4 words, captured at low volume, clear enough for a jury. Words that did not appear anywhere in the report filed at 12:51. The words were, "should have stayed home." The 3rd recording came from a body camera, not an agency-issued unit. A personal device, compact, clipped to the inside of Benjamin's jacket, activated by a double tap at the moment Boris's vehicle had pulled alongside his 3 blocks before the checkpoint. Benjamin had started carrying it 6 months earlier, after a colleague from his veteran support group described a traffic stop that ended with a knee on his back and a report that bore no resemblance to what had occurred. His colleague had had no recording. The report stood. Benjamin had ordered the device 2 days later. The camera had recorded the commands, the compliance, the door opening, the shot, and the silence of a man on the ground staying completely still by choice. The district attorney watched Benjamin's footage once, then called her senior investigator and told him to pull everything filed under Boris's badge number in the prior 24 months. What came back was not hidden. It had simply never been placed in one room. In the 18 months before Hennepin Avenue, Boris had logged 7 stops involving vehicles displaying protest materials or political signage. All 7 had escalated. 2 resulted in detentions without charge. 3 involved vehicle searches conducted without consent. 2 generated use of force filings, both reviewed internally, both closed without disciplinary action. A supervisor's note on the second filing read, "Agent Boris demonstrates appropriate situational awareness in high-tension environments." In the same period, he had encountered 3 vehicles displaying pro-law enforcement materials or counter-protest signage. None of those stops escalated. None resulted in force. 2 were not logged at all. The investigators placed all 10 contacts side by side. The pattern organized itself. Same jurisdiction, same stop type, different materials in the window, different outcomes every time. The investigators did not need to construct the argument. The records made it. Boris had not been reacting to danger. He had been selecting targets. Christopher Boris filed his incident report before Benjamin's wound had been dressed. Without those 3 recordings, that report was the only written account of what happened on Hennepin Avenue that morning. Do you think this case reaches a courtroom without them? Drop yes or no in the comments and share this with anyone who still thinks documentation is something other than essential. 3 weeks after the shooting, Benjamin's attorney filed a standard discovery request for all communications on Boris's agency-issued devices in the 72 hours surrounding the incident. The request was routine. The return was not. Among the recovered files was a group message thread, 6 participants, Boris included. The thread had been active the night before the shooting. The subject of discussion was the planned protest route, the same route the demonstration organizers had published publicly the previous week, the route that ran along Hennepin Avenue the following morning. A message from Boris, sent at 11 minutes past 11 the previous evening, read, "Going to be a busy morning on Hennepin." A colleague replied, "Stay safe out there." Boris responded, "Always do. Some of these people need a lesson in how this works." The thread was time-stamped at 11 minutes past 11 in the evening. Benjamin's car had been on Hennepin Avenue at 11:40 the following morning. Boris had not encountered a vehicle with protest stickers and reacted. He had known the route, stationed himself within it, and gone looking. The self-defense argument his legal team had been constructing, split-second judgment, perceived threat, reasonable officer response, did not survive the timestamp. Every piece of it required the stop to have been spontaneous. It had not been. The investigators did not stop at the messages. In 9 years with the agency, Boris had accumulated 4 formal public complaints. All 4 had moved through internal review. None had produced disciplinary action. One complaint had included a corroborating statement from a fellow agent. That statement had been received, logged, and filed without follow-up. There had been a civil matter the prior year, a community organizer detained at a demonstration checkpoint for 51 minutes without charge or explanation. The agency's legal office had settled. The amount did not appear in public filings. Boris had been back on duty within the week. The agency had not failed to manage Christopher Boris. It had actively continued him, renewed his contract, processed his filings, absorbed the settlement, and produced the supervisor's note about situational awareness. The structure around him had not been passive. It had been deliberate. He had not acted alone in any sense that carried weight. He had acted within a system that had, for 9 years, confirmed that he was right. The courtroom was full when the recordings played. People had arrived before the building opened. They stood along the back wall and filled the overflow room where a mounted screen carried the live feed. They were quiet, not the quiet of restraint, but the quiet of people who understood that the moment required it. Boris sat at the defense table in a charcoal suit. No badge, no agency seal, no 9-year institutional record at his back making his word sufficient. He was a 41-year-old man waiting for 12 people to assign a number to what he had done. Benjamin entered with his left shoulder carrying a slight forward tilt residual, physical, the compensation pattern of someone who had spent 3 months in therapy relearning a movement to his body once made without thought. He declined to be seated during his testimony. He stood for the full duration. His wife Dana was in the 3rd row. Their daughter was at school. Dana had made that decision herself, without consultation, because it was hers to make. The prosecution's closing did not use the word racist. It used the word premeditated. It placed the text thread on the projected screen next to the pharmacy footage, next to the bystander's phone, next to the 7 prior stops, and told the jury that what they were looking at was not a record of poor judgment. It was a record of decision-making. The only remaining question was what the decisions had been based on. Then it played the 11 seconds. Then it played the 4 words. The jury deliberated for 19 hours across 2 days. The verdict came back on a Wednesday morning. Guilty on all 5 counts. Attempted murder, aggravated assault, deprivation of civil rights under color of law, unlawful use of federal authority, conduct prejudicial to civil order. The gallery did not react. The room went still, the stillness of people who understood that this was a conclusion, not a resolution. Benjamin sat with both hands flat on the table. He did not look at Boris. Dana did not look away from her husband. Their daughter was 7 years old. She was at school. She would be told that evening in words Benjamin had been composing for weeks. Boris was led out through the side door. He did not look at Benjamin. That evening, Benjamin sat on the edge of his daughter's bed and told her what had happened and what the jury had decided. He used plain language. He did not simplify in the ways adults often choose to simplify when they are trying to protect a child from the exact shape of a thing. She listened without interrupting. When he finished, she was quiet. Then she asked if he had been scared. He told her no. He told her that when it happened, his body already knew what to do, that a long time ago, in places far from home, he had been trained to stay composed in situations designed to produce panic, and that the training was the reason he was sitting next to her. She thought about that. Then she said, "So the army kept you safe from the police?" Benjamin did not answer immediately. He looked at the wall above her bed. A drawing she had made of the two of them at the community center, crayon on construction paper, taped up slightly crooked, his figure taller than the building. He said, "Something like that, baby." He did not say the rest. He did not say that his survival had been his, specific to him, earned across deployments that most people in that neighborhood would never take, and that it had done nothing for the man who had not served, had not deployed, had not spent years conditioning his body to respond correctly in a moment with no margin. The training was not a solution. It had been his solution, on that street, by 11 seconds and a controlled fall. His daughter's question had the logic of a 7-year-old. It was also exact. The room held it without an answer, because there was none that would satisfy what the question was actually asking. At sentencing, Benjamin delivered his victim impact statement standing. He described 3 months of physical therapy, 6 weeks of limited mobility in his left arm, nightmares not about Boris, but about his daughter asking questions without answers. He described returning to the community center 2 weeks after the shooting and watching the teenagers he worked with notice the way he moved his shoulder. They said nothing. They had already learned, at 15 and 16, not to ask certain questions out loud. He turned to the bench and asked the judge a single question in a level voice. What does it tell the next generation when the skills a man needs to survive a combat zone are the same ones he needs to survive a traffic stop at home? The courtroom did not move. The judge sentenced Christopher Boris to 52 years in state prison. She addressed him before the gavel in a flat, deliberate tone, no elevation, no performance. She said he had been entrusted with federal authority over every person in his jurisdiction. She said he had used that authority to target a man based on what he believed. She said the record provided no basis for leniency, and she found none on her own. The gavel struck. In the months that followed, 2 of the 7 prior stops were referred for independent review. 1 person detained without charge was formally notified and cleared of any associated record. A former colleague gave investigators a statement that the language in the text thread was not unusual, that it reflected how the unit communicated. He was placed on administrative leave pending review. The agency announced 4 reforms. All 4 had been proposed by a community coalition 2 years earlier and declined at the time. Benjamin returned to the community center. He went back to the teenagers without announcement. He also began speaking to civic groups, to training programs, to anyone who would have him about the woman with the dog. He said she had not done anything extraordinary. She had seen a stop that did not sound routine, and she had decided she was not willing to be the person who kept walking. That was the whole of it. He spoke about the 11 seconds, about 4 words that a written report had left out and could not now recover, about the specific permanent nature of audio that catches a man in the moment between what he did and what he decided to say about it. He ended every talk the same way, in the same voice he had used on the ground on Hennepin Avenue when he announced that he was not reaching for anything. The only version of events that goes unchallenged is the one no one was present enough to record. Christopher Boris counted on no one being present. He was wrong by 11 seconds.
If you like this video, make sure to hit that like button, subscribe, and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss the next story. Share this video with someone who would appreciate it, and let's keep building this community together. And before you go, drop a comment below. I'd love to hear your thoughts on what stood out to you the most. Until next time, stay safe, stay curious, and I'll see you in the next.